Well, hi, my name is Micah Steiner,
And I am Sarah Salzberg.
and we are your morning session leaders. We just want to start by thanking you. Thank you so much for serving in the community. It's so important that we as Christians take the time out of our busy schedules to help meet real and physical needs, and in particular for you, the needs of the people in Minneapolis.
Yeah. And every morning for the next 3 days, we're going to be going through specifically Psalm 46, and today just the first couple verses. But just so we have an understanding of what the Psalms are, they are actually a songbook for God's people. It's kind of hard for us to see and picture that sometimes, because when we open up our Bibles to the Psalms, it's just a bunch of words on a page. But they were meant to be sung. And they would have been used a lot in the worship life, certainly for the Israelites. And because of that, they formed this identity, this individual, but also a communal identity for God's people. And while they're inspired by God, absolutely, they arose out of real life situations for particular people, whether that be thanksgiving or grief or struggle or whatever that might look like. Probably a psalm most people are pretty familiar with. Hopefully, Micah, you know this psalm. Psalm 23, even though I walk through
The valley of the shadow of death.
I will
fear no. Oh, I thought we were gonna complete each other's sentences.
I will fear
No evil.
Yeah. Micah's actually hoping to be a pastor, so this is all just a test for him.
Thanks for giving me an easy one.
Yeah.
What's Hezekiah 13:5?
That's not even a book
Exactly.
Okay.
That's my point.
Well, Psalm 23 is. And David was actually walking through a very real valley, facing very real death in a battle with Goliath. Another one David wrote, you might know this also, it's one maybe some of you sing at your church on Sundays. Create in me a
Clean heart, O God.
And renew a
right spirit within me.
Good. See, you're getting good at this. I
pat
think you're for
myself
sure
on
going
the
to be a
back.
pastor.
Thank you.
But that came after, again, a very real adultery with Bathsheba and a very real murder of her husband and the guilt that he felt.
So the Psalms are real life, and what we want to do today is focus on the first 3 verses of Psalm 46. And here's what we're going to focus on, these words: God is our help.
So it says in Psalm 46, verses 1 through 3, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth gives way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling.
So picking up on what you were talking about, Sarah, of the Psalms being songs, this is not the type of song that you're going to sing on a good day, right?
Probably not.
Not on your wedding day. Sounds more like a disaster movie, right? So picture this in your mind: mountains crumbling into the sea, waters roaring, mountains are trembling.
It's kind of terrifying if you're in the bus and we're like, hey, the earth could just move underneath you. It's
Fortunately,
fine.
there's no mountains in
Yeah,
Minneapolis, so the imagery won't quite be as powerful.
That we know of.
The key phrase that we want to pick up on here is the trouble is real. So regardless of where you're at, the trouble is real. Think about the way that you feel when you experience trouble. We can feel spiritually and emotionally like the earth around us is collapsing. And so verse 1 through 3 doesn't just show us that the trouble is real, but the trouble is cosmic.
What do you mean by cosmic?
Okay, so cosmic means that no matter how hard we try, we cannot escape the trouble because it's everywhere. And for those of you listening, think about this. Have you ever, by your own actions, been able to avoid the trouble, all trouble through all time? And the answer is no, right? We can't escape it. So the idea being that we live in a broken world where things like earthquakes and bullying and death and cats exist.
Cats.
Yeah, cats.
I also don't care for cats.
Oh, you misunderstand me. I don't not care for cats. I just don't love cats.
I really hope that they're not serving Minneapolis by going to a cat shelter.
What are you guys doing today? It's better not to talk about it. Okay.
I think you guys get it though. The trouble is real whether you like cats or not.
Right, and here's where it gets interesting, because most of us as Americans have a pretty comfortable life. And I say most because we do have students here coming to the gathering, and they're coming from tough situations, so I don't want to minimize that. But if that's you, consider this, that the fact that you are here today, even the ability to come to this gathering, that even if it's a 1-week respite from the difficult life in which you are coming from, that's a respite, it's a refuge, it's a gift from God. And so regardless of your comfort level back at home, whether you're rich or poor, middle class, suburb, inner city, that represents our culture well. As an American, here is what separates us from almost every other country in the world, and it's this. Our culture teaches us that you can have everything that you want if you work hard enough.
Now, hear us on this. There is nothing wrong with hard work. In fact, we hope that as you are serving today, you are putting in your best effort with the gifts that God gave you to take care of the people's needs. Hard work and putting your whole heart into whatever work God's called you to do is a biblical value. So that's not the issue.
But if you're going to experience, but you are going to experience some tension. And that tension exists because, again, we're thinking about the culture that we live in as Americans and our Christian faith. There's tension there. Why? Because remember, the trouble's real. Okay?
Because if you bring that idea of if I work hard enough into my Christian life, that doesn't mesh well.
Right.
Because it's real trouble that we're having.
So we experience this tension because no matter how hard we try to protect ourselves, and Sarah, you just said this, no matter how strong of a Christian you think you are or you want to be, want to hit this home really, really well, there's nothing you can do to fix the trouble that you find yourself in.
It's why in our culture, despite how much wealth and resources that this country has, we still see so many who are in need. And that doesn't just have to do with money. I think about time. If you consider how many places around the world people would have to travel a mile or more just to get water, and I simply go to one of the 20 taps in my house, I've just gained a lot of time. And yet probably most of you, even though you're sitting on a bus, driving somewhere or just working, you feel like you don't have enough time. Whether that's time with your parents because they're working long hours to give you the life that you have, or it's just because you have so many great things you get to be a part of, like sports and school and work, but you don't feel like you have enough time to just sit and exist as a human.
Hey, question. How many taps do you have at your house? You said 20 taps.
I guess.
Do you get paid that much as a Lutheran school teacher?
One. I live in the
Whether you have 20 taps or 40 taps.
Does a bathroom count? I have 5.
Okay. So more realistic for the majority of us not living in mansions, you're 5 taps.
Okay.
But it's a great point. We
Yes.
have so much access to things. And so here's the deal. Whether we're a 9th century Israelite, when this psalm was written and they would have been hearing it for the first time, or whether we're a 21st century American, there's 2 common ways in which we might be tempted to think about our troubles in lieu of the culture that we live. And the first one is that we might be tempted to believe that when we experience trouble, it's actually God punishing us for not being a good person. And I know, Sarah, you've got a great example of how you've experienced that.
Yeah. So when I was dropped off at college, my parents told me that they were getting a divorce. And while certainly I wasn't experiencing a literal mountain being moved into the heart of the sea, like Psalm 46 described, figuratively it felt a whole lot like my world was crumbling around me. And there were a lot of people in my life who meant well. They wanted to comfort me, but they told me things like, everything happens for a reason, which is just a masked way to say, figure out what bad thing you did to deserve this and what good thing you can do to fix it. Or they would say things like, God would never give you something you can't handle, which if you're like a grown woman crying on the floor of your dorm room into the stuffed animal you brought from your childhood, I don't know that I would consider that, quote, handling it.
Yeah. Thanks for that great, thanks for that comforting word.
Yeah. But that's kind of the issue, is that we are told that there's something that we can do to fix this problem, and I did have good, positive people in my life telling me the truth, telling me that I can't fix it, I can't handle this. So that when I'm asking questions like, why do bad things happen to good people, I had a lot of great friends and professors and people at college who reminded me that there's only been one good person, and that's Jesus Christ. And the bad thing that happened to him, his death, was in order to give me a refuge. And so that was comforting, because when I think about that American culture telling us, just fix it, just dissolve it, well, I can't.
Right.
I can't do that.
And I want to, I guess, 2 things here. One, first to say thank you for being vulnerable. And I hope everybody heard that vulnerability. It's really important that we see that modeled in our culture, because the culture, again, says we can do it, we got to be tough, and we as Christians need to be more vulnerable with other Christians so that we can be encouraged. I mean, that's how God speaks. The second thing is to recognize that, again, going back to the topic or the idea that we could be tempted to believe that when we experience trouble, God's punishing us for not being a good person. I have to admit that I have said some of those things, and we made fun of it, but you and I talked earlier that we've said some of these cliche statements, and this is an opportunity, if you listening have said those things, to stop, to get an opportunity to maybe think about the way we approach the problems in the future.
And I think one of the reasons that it's comforting and why we kind of go to those words is that it puts us in control. And when everything is crumbling around you, the last thing you want to feel is out of control. And this I'll call the prosperity gospel, because in addition to believing that God might be punishing us for something we did wrong, then the other side of it is, well, then we believe that if we're good enough, that God's going to bless us and keep us from all troubles. And that's just, it's an easy way to put it on us.
Yeah.
And why, unfortunately, it's such a prevalent belief and thing that's taught in Christianity is because it's something I can do and I can fix this. But the reason that it's so dangerous is, look who it makes the refuge. Where do I place my safety and security in that theology?
Right, me as the individual.
It's all on me. I have to do something, and then it also means that I don't really have to care for anybody else because they need to start doing their own thing, right?
Right.
And I think that really is the tough thing, is that that theology makes you think it's everybody else for their own good and me for my own good. And that makes me think about Jonah. You know the story of Jonah?
Yeah, Jonah and the giant fish. I read about it in Sunday school.
Oh, good.
Yeah. They usually use a whale.
I know.
I don't know if you're familiar with that. Theology teacher.
Actually,
it's
the word,
incorrect.
Well, it could be. Who knows? I like to think that Jonah got swallowed by a giant sea cucumber.
Really?
But that's my own.
Is that a real thing, a cucumber?
A giant sea cucumber?
Yeah, I've never heard of it. Do they look like a cucumber?
Yeah,
I'm
it's
assuming?
giant. The
Green
word giant sea cucumber. I mean,
I
I think it'd be like a dark green.
It's going to
like
be really
an
hard
eel.
for me to eat a cucumber in my
Yeah.
salad after this. This is...
Just
I'm so sorry. It's not you, it's me.
hope Jonah's not in there.
Okay, go
If
ahead.
you hit a person,
Sorry.
you know you got Jonah's cucumber. But for those of you that don't know the story of Jonah, God asked him to go take care of the people of Nineveh. He asked him to go and share the good news that God can forgive even them, that it is him. He is the refuge. And Jonah basically says, nope, don't wanna, not gonna. And he leaves, and he goes on a boat, and there's a storm that rages. He offers to toss himself overboard, and he is in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, just sinking down. And as he's drowning, God sends a fish to swallow him. Jonah did nothing for his own safety and security. Jonah was going to die drowning. It is Yahweh, it is God alone who provides for Jonah's refuge. And while Jonah's in the belly of this fish, he prays a prayer. He prays to God. He takes actually a bunch of different psalms and he puts them all together to fit his scenario.
So I would summarize this using modern culture by saying #Jesus got this.
Well, I want to first do Jonah got this, because I want to read the prayer that Jonah said.
Oh, well, we should do that.
Yeah. But Jonah 2, so this is what Jonah says in the middle of his...
Being in the belly of
a
fish, which was a smelly, gross...
I'm sure it was disgusting. Better than drowning.
Well, I just don't like seafood. Yeah. Okay, back to Jonah. Jonah 2. I called out to the Lord out of my distress, and he answered me. Out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice. For you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the flood surrounded me. All your waves and your billows passed over me. Then I said, I am driven away from your sight, yet I shall look again upon your holy temple. The waters closed in over me to take my life. The deep surrounded me. Weeds were wrapped about my head at the roots of the mountains. I went down to the land whose bars closed upon me forever.
Jonah sees that he has no hope on his own. On his own, he is facing real death. But listen, I'll read the last part of his prayer because he points to what the real refuge is. He says, yet you brought up my life from the pit, O Lord my God. You did that. When my life was fading away, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came to you into your holy temple. Those who pay regard to vain idols forsake their hope of steadfast love, but I with the voice of thanksgiving will sacrifice to you. What I vowed I will pay. Salvation belongs to the Lord. And some translations say salvation comes from the Lord. He understood that the only way for salvation is by what God can provide. The only way for any real help out of trouble is by God's hand, not my own.
So that gets back to Jesus having this. He's God, he's got this. I think the struggle for all of us is we might know this, we might hear this in church. A better question is, how can we trust in it? So as we kind of wrap up here and close, we're going to look at John 16:33. And before we do that, some context here. If you're not familiar with John 16, it's Maundy, Thursday. And this is the day before Jesus would die on the cross. We call that day Good Friday. He's celebrating the Passover meal with his disciples, and then he says these words. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. Now listen to this. In this world you will have
trouble. He's promising, hey, it's going to be rough.
What a great marketing slogan, Jesus. You might need to go to a PR firm.
Yeah.
But thinking back on what we talked about before, that warning doesn't always sit well for us. Again, as Americans, we're culturally a little bit different because we're taught that every day we can avoid trouble, we can protect ourselves from it. I love this though. Jesus isn't afraid of it, right? He doesn't try to brush it under a rug like we often do in our society. Instead, he confronts it. He says, in this world you will have trouble. However, this is the big point here. However, he does something about it with these words, I have overcome the world. It's what you were talking about with Jonah, that translation. Salvation comes from the Lord. Jesus enters into our trouble. And so the idea we want to leave you with is that Jesus is our safety and our security, and this is how. Again, going back to the upper room, right? It's a Maundy, Thursday. They're having a big feast. Yeah. And Jesus institutes the words of the Lord's Supper. And most of you listening, you've heard these words over and over in your church. Whenever you do communion, the words, this is my body given for you, this is my blood shed for you. And what we want to leave you with, and really we're praying for you that this will sink home for you, is the Lord's Supper is a tangible way that Jesus can be our safety and security because of those words for you. He's offering you a place of refuge from the aftershocks of our sin, like the guilt, the shame, the fear, the worry, the anxiety, all these things that we feel inside because of this brokenness and the trouble. And listen to this. He enters into our trouble by giving up his place of refuge so that we could have refuge forever.
That's one of the reasons that Christ gave us the church, because we find security for ourselves in the body of Christ. Yes, his body at communion, and also his body as the church. And then we provide security for others in that body of Christ. That communion, it's a great piece that it's a reminder. When it says for you, it doesn't just mean me. It's all of us. And so something we want to encourage you with as you're serving, while you're serving today, there's probably going to be some downtime. And there's going to be some times where you're serving alongside somebody and you have nothing to talk about. I hate awkward silence, so I'm always ready to fill it.
What is the go-to awkward silence in Minneapolis? Like, oh, this weather is just so sticky, and how about that weather? Yeah, I know, we're all here. I'm feeling it.
Nobody could ask you about what fish you've tried recently because you would say none.
Hey, look at that.
Micah.
Sorry. Okay,
calm
focus.
Down.
Go.
So here's what we want you to do. So if you at some point, if you could take some time to talk with the people that you're serving with, I would encourage you to tell them about the troubles in this world that hurt you. And that might be something that, if you're comfortable sharing your own personal troubles, if you're ready to do that and the people that you are serving with, you feel confident will be confidential and trustworthy in that, by all means do that. But it could also be what you see in this sin-sick world that pains you. Because we each have things that bother us, that are broken in this world, and it's important that we share that with one another, because we might see that we have some of those same struggles, but we also might see that I didn't even have my eyes open to that trouble, and you revealed it to me. And that's something that Micah and I are pretty close friends, and we talk about this a lot, that there's a lot of things that we see in our own communities that might be similar but also different. And so take some time at any point to share either those personal troubles or kind of those big global cosmic troubles that Micah talked about.
Yeah. So we are praying for you. And again, thank you so much for serving our community here. And God bless you. And we will see you tomorrow.
Excellent. Have a great day.